Okay, behind the wheel again. This time with Paul Martin.
Hi, Johan. Pleasure to be here.
Good to have you in the car. You have lately been writing some very interesting articles from fast, low latency, and now about scaling CDNs and managing the traffic, which is of course a very hot topic here at IBC. So tell me a little bit about scaling traffic. What do you think of? What are the concerns and the considerations you have in that space?
Yeah, so thanks for having me in the car, Johan, of course. And the subject's really been about when we look to the future of large broadcasters.
Oh, watch out! There's a bump. Oh,
wow.
Sorry.
No worries. Jeez, that was a bump. The subject of large broadcasters bringing all of their viewership at some point in the relatively near future across the streaming platforms, and that's the kind of the general subject, and the subject of how do you scale the delivery infrastructure and the distribution of that video.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that fascinates me. I write about it, talk about it a lot. And mix of broadband and broadcasting. And
this is the interesting interception between TV and broadcast and telecom and internet, right? So you need to understand both to figure out how this traffic will be generated and also how to cope with it and so on. So I agree. It actually fits me pretty well because I've done like half my career in telecom and the other half in media. So it's a good subject, I think. And and of course, as you mentioned, if all the viewing minutes that today are being delivered as broadcast will be moved on to internet. That's a lot of traffic.
It's a lot of traffic.
And
you know, the estimate right now from many broadcasters that I'm speaking with in the European market is 10 to 20% of their total viewership is on their streaming platform.
Yeah.
That's leaving 80 to 90% on typically the linear and terrestrial platforms, the traditional platforms.
And do you think that figure is even more on traditional when it comes to the big sports events and so on? Because obviously the big sports event is what is driving the peaks, right? So
from a peaks point of view, I think there's still enormous peaks and it's divided across the platform. So if you've got a streaming option for it, people are seeing big audiences, but they're still seeing the really big ones on the linear.
Yeah.
Right? So people are having issues with the big peaks on the streaming platforms, but it's actually more about, there's a lot of VOD consumption, even for broadcasters now. You know, you go onto they've got big VOD catalogs, people are consuming catch-up TV more often. So, that's the real volume.
And you are right, actually, when there are very popular shows, I remember in particular HBO show Game of Thrones that was pretty popular. Actually, the dates when they launched the new episodes on those, they also got pretty big peaks. I mean, maybe not
appointment TV stuff for VOD. Yeah, absolutely. But you know what happens, of course, we can get access to a whole box set, a whole episode, a whole series, all in one go, and that's also driving the binge viewing.
Yeah.
So hours and hours and hours of viewing of series, and you finish them up and you're done. You know, those VOD. That VOD pattern is driving the peaks in the evenings and the weekends and so on, because people still watch TV pretty much at the same time. So it's just VOD instead of live. But yeah, this whole subject of, well, what does it look like when broadcast content is really all being delivered through streaming?
Yeah.
That's the point. So,
and when all of that happens, is there... Do we need to come up with some brand new innovation for this, or what do you think is the biggest problem? Are we waiting for a breakthrough, or is this something we could manage?
Well, I think that's often a contentious thing to discuss in our media tech space, isn't it? Where we are constantly creating new things, lots of innovation, and there's some established ways of doing things, and lots and lots of different ways of solving the problem. But from my point of view, with my mix of broadband background, thinking about the capacity that's available in those networks to deliver, a lot of it is about how an edge server needs to be able to deliver these thousands and thousands of streams, but at the right point in the chain, because we know that the video and data take hops through networks. Where you put the last hop, for me, is the fundamental point, because if you've got a live stream especially, you know, it's one stream in, even if it's multiple bit rates, and then it's thousands out. If you do that too far away from the consumers, of course you're going to flood a network.
Yeah.
You could, or it needs to have huge amounts of capacity. What if you put it deeper in the network?
Yeah.
Well, then you don't flood the core. You actually streamline, you take traffic away, and then you deliver it very, very much from the edge. But that to me is not a technical innovation. That is a business challenge, which involves telcos, ISPs, CDNs, content providers backing the whole thing.
So it's just as much a kind of business model slash interface problem between business entities, how to agree on.
I think so. And you know, it's interesting that it's not. The leading streamers are doing this already.
Yeah.
As we know, Netflix and Open Connect is a famous example. DAZN with DAZN Edge is about how do they ensure they're going to get best performance on their huge live audiences in certain countries where they have the biggest rights.
Yeah.
But what happens when national broadcasters find exactly the same situation?
Yeah.
Right? Which they will, because they're going to have big live events.
No, I mean you are right that today in Europe at least the public broadcasters represents a lion's share of the peaks quite often.
Absolutely.
Because they have those national football games and so on that everyone is interested in. So I think it's
and I think it goes into as well when you go, well, what does the future of this look like, and why do I think I talk about needing a blueprint, and some things I write about I use the rather alarmist phrase called the streaming tsunami.
Yeah.
Well, it's because there's a pickup of huge demand from consumers, which is just growing, and the big live events are often scaling really quickly because people realize sometimes they get the best, maybe they're going to get the best resolution on the streaming platform, perhaps, or it's just their preferred way now.
And maybe you're right. Maybe there's even counterproductive, if you will, to try coming up with an infinite number of new innovations that are supposed to solve something, when what we more need is to agree on how to deploy and how to build it, because all these new ideas might even disturb that process, right? Because everyone is waiting for something that can solve this ultimately, and we might sit on the solution. It's just a matter of rolling it out, if you will.
So I agree with you, by the way, because I put a very simple spin on this myself, and working in the CDN space for a long time, and thinking about unicast and thinking about why unicast is really the dominant form of delivery for streaming, simply personalization. You have to deliver personalized content in unicast form. VOD is unicast.
Yeah.
You want to do ad insertion, the dynamic ad insertion, you're going to switch to unicast. You want to do time shift TV, you're going to be in unicast. So for me, I look at it and I say, well, look, we have a method of delivery today where we deal with HTTPS, we deal with HLS and Dash, we deal with unicast. Doesn't that work if you put the infrastructure in the right place?
I think it does.
Wrong?
And to be honest, if you look at, Moore's law is fantastic, right?
Yes.
It doubles the performance or capacity of technology roughly every 18 months, and it just continues to deliver, and that means that the fiber technology and the servers are typically capable of providing the capacity we need. But the architecture we use must kind of support that, right? Yeah. So the problem is if we don't evolve the architecture as the usage goes up, then we have a problem. But Moore's law going to help us with a kind of physical performance, if you will. We just need to figure out how to deploy this in such a way that the industry can agree that this is the best way to do it.
Yeah. And again, I end up with a very simple model in my head, which is I need an input to a server which is coming from an origination point, which is probably going to be a cloud-hosted, generally speaking, origination point, because flexibility is needed in that part of the chain. Then you get into, well, the stream comes out of the origination point and needs to go into a network. Yeah. And at some point, you're going to have servers that need to be fed, and that's the edge cache. Well, if I have those edge caches in many, many, many different locations to support national-size audiences, then my input is very low bit rate in total, because a live channel needs, as I said earlier,
it's
megabits per second. We're not in terabits per second.
No. Yeah.
The terabits per second comes at the edge.
Yes.
From the edge.
Yep.
And
and
it's
from
really simple. So how many pops do we need?
From a pure technology perspective, live is the easiest use case because you don't require shitloads of caches and disks that are spinning warm and so on. So it's actually primarily about architecture and allowing the bandwidth expansion to happen at the right places.
It is. And I raise the contentious subjects perhaps of fair share and so forth, and who needs to invest what in order to achieve this scale. Some of the papers I'm currently working on actually get into what would scale mean? What do we need? How much capacity do we need
Yeah.
Given that we're seeing broadband networks become fiber all the way to the home, of course, we're going into 5G for mobile. I mean, that's today, let alone in 5 years or 10 years, where are we going to be then? But some of the papers I've written reflect on the fact that access networks and the capacity we have at home for broadband is so great that we won't use that for our video streaming,
nope.
Not all of it. But further upstream, where peering points exist and core networks exist, there becomes a problem. Because we're going to flood it if we allow the edges to completely deliver all their content into those locations.
And we get back to the architecture. Right? It's maybe less about coming up with new technologies, more about plugging the right cables together so that we avoid bottlenecks that can quite easily be avoided.
Yeah.
And if we do that, we don't have a huge problem when it comes to innovation. We have a huge problem in agreeing how to connect this and what business model we should use and so on. So I think that's a very good conclusion.
The other thing on the flip side of where the benefits of doing something like this and figuring out what a blueprint looks like, and I'm a firm believer that internet-based delivery of content is probably using the ubiquity or the ubiquitousness of the internet is probably the most efficient way for us all to be thinking about consuming content for the long term.
Yep.
It's a fantastic infrastructure that we have with the internet.
Internet I do believe that it's kind of concluded now that internet is the fastest value-bringing product mankind have ever invented.
Oh, right.
So fighting internet seems like the wrong strategy, right?
Yeah,
it's smarter to embrace it and work with it. Yeah,
because
and
it does work.
It does work.
Let's be honest, the majority of streaming video just works.
Yeah, it works.
It's not like we're all at home complaining. Not everyone.
And the irony is that some of the most successful internet companies out there have based their success on video.
Right. True.
So if you do a list of which are the 5 most profitable or biggest internet services, I'm pretty sure we're going to figure out that most of them actually use video as a part of the success. So apparently internet works for video. We just need to figure out how to do it. And another question. So you mentioned this having flexibility and so on. So virtualization and cloud. Do you think that there is a role for that to play in the CDN space?
Yes, I do. I think naturally, we're all drawn to the idea that we're not going to use that capacity every minute of every day, and because of that, the responsible thing to do from an energy consumption point of view, and also perhaps commercially, is to be able to spin up and down capacity when needed. So primetime viewing and then what happens in the middle of the night are 2 very different levels of capacity usage. So with that said, you can consider how to make the whole environment super flexible, I think.
Yeah.
The interesting thing for me is do you create challenges in video performance with high bandwidth throughput, especially if we're really going forward?
It's the classical compromise, right? Yeah. Flexibility versus performance. I think it doesn't matter in what kind of technical choice you are looking. That's always orthogonal.
Indeed.
So
yes.
So
and even this is not my specific area of direct expertise, but if I'm thinking about how a computer is gonna or a device is going to respond during prime time when it needs to be delivering absolutely flawlessly, or it might be at strange hours of the day, but it's a major event. Do we want interrupts? And the whole concept of interrupts in video delivery is a major issue, I think.
Yeah.
It often can ruin a server's performance and lead to the problems that people can often complain about. So one of the things that mainstreaming, for example, is working very close to the actual network card itself, and working close to in the operating system, not virtualizing things because it does affect performance.
Yep. No,
I'm not saying there's not a use case for it. A lot of VOD content we deliver, is it a problem for that? Don't know, but
no. And then also I think because this, personally I worked with when I started working in telecom, that was in the very beginning of the shift from circuit switch to packet switched.
Okay.
And all so-called experts back then said that voice will never work on packet switched because packet switch doesn't offer the reliability as you have on circuit switched. And here we are today, and pretty much all phone calls are on packet switch. So many of these challenges we have due to technical concepts today might not be a challenge at all tomorrow.
And I think, you know, obviously lots of people say if we wouldn't have if we were building the internet for video, we wouldn't have built it the way it's been built.
No,
but
caches would have been built in. Yeah, it does work. It does work.
So we figured out how to make it work. So yeah, I think we're going to continue down this track.
Yeah.
And figure it out as we go. And as we go into even things like immersive viewing experiences and virtual realities that are going to put massive pressure on networks, we're just going to continue to grow through that with Moore's law behind us, and it's all going to be okay. We're right on the night.
Yes.
I guess we can say.
Yeah. I think we're closing into our destination, but I think we have some great conclusions here. It's more about agreeing about how to build this and do that, both technically and from a kind of entity perspective, different businesses and markets, and then just do it, and then we have the solution.
Indeed.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Johan.